Thinking of investing, working, or starting a business in the cannabis industry? We've got you covered right here on Plant Problems. Hosted by Tony Frischknecht, Plant Problems takes a different approach to cannabis than what you're seeing and hearing from the mainstream media. Come along with Tony and be in the know about how to invest, work, or start a cannabis business. Let's get the show started with your host, Tony Frischknecht.
Welcome back to another episode of Plant Problems. I'm your host, Tony Frischknecht, and today I'm very excited to bring you a different style of guest. His name is Casey Murdock. Casey Murdock started as a musician, and shortly after finishing his only album, he started a podcast called Chronicles of Comic-Con with friends that spun out of control as he became a professional in the Comic-Con circuit. He has moderated panels of tons of celebrities and for personal friends' creative projects all over the U.S. He has two video podcasts, Down the Road Show and the cooking show, Cooking with Casey, on his YouTube channels when his health allows him. He also worked in the restaurant industry for 2 decades. I am very excited because he is working on a new docu-series that's coming out about cannabis, and we're going to be discussing that today. Casey, thank you so much for joining me. How are you doing today?
Great, Tony. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
It's great to have you here. Before we get into discussing the docu-series,
my level of great with my health. Yeah, I should clarify.
I want to get into, how does somebody fall into the Comic-Con? It baffles me how you just kind of fell into this whole thing.
Well, that's the crazy part is like I just fell into it and then became small press and was on the list for every award show in Hollywood. I was a year away from getting red carpet access, and then things happened and I lost my website, and without the website I'm no longer press and couldn't get access to the Golden Globes and all of those anyway. But yeah, how you fall into it, that's the weird part is, so I was dragged kicking and screaming to my first San Diego Comic-Con. So the biggest comic convention on the planet that everybody wants to go to. I didn't even want to go to. I save a place for my friends in Hall H line, which is the biggest event to get into all weekend, where they do all the premieres of the movies and new TV shows coming out. It holds 5,000 people. The line goes all the way around the convention center. It's crazy. I slept in shorts in mildewy grass overnight in San Diego, holding the place, not knowing what I was getting into. That weekend blew my mind because, I like comic books, but I was always more of a superhero movie kind of a guy and TV show kind of a guy. Mm-hmm. My great uncle was Commissioner Gordon on the original Batman series. So I grew up.
Oh, wow.
I grew up loving the industry already.
So that's where you get your start in comics. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. But I'm not a comic book reader and collector like a lot of my friends in the industry. So I'm down there as I'm just wrapping up my album and realize that this is more than comic books. This is all of Hollywood. There's basketball players and football players down here. There's porn stars. There's everything. People I wouldn't imagine I'm running into down there. So I go down the next year to promote my album and hand out a bunch of little buttons and pens with my website on there so people can download the first song for free. And about an hour on Saturday, about an hour after I hand out the very last pen, 2 guys get in a fight in Hall H, where I had spent the previous year, because their legs were touching because they just cram them in there. And one of these guys takes my pen and stabs the other guy in the eye. So the only violent act ever at San Diego Comic-Con was with my promotional pen, my second year at Comic-Con, and things start going from there.
Okay, so that you definitely almost got thrown into it then at that point, it sounds like.
Exactly. Chris Hardwick even mentioned the incident in his one of his stand-up routines. So from there, I realized I'm small press and go to my first Comic-Con with the Down the Road Show podcast for Wizard World, the only one ever.
How long had the podcast been going at this point?
couple months.
Okay. So this was your beginning, really.
Yeah. So this is the beginning. Down the road show. My friend JC is like, "Hey, I want to start a podcast." I'm like, "Well, my dad was called the golden voice of Lake Powell. He was in radio. It's the only thing I ever thought about actually going to college for. Hell yeah, let's start a podcast." So he went and talked to where I recorded my album and about doing the podcast out of there. I'm like, "That's not going to work. Let me tell you exactly how that's going to go with these douchebags over there." And it did. And he called me. I'm like, "Okay, perfect. Cool. Let's meet and have lunch. And I'll start us a podcast," put out an ad. And that's how we found Mario Toscano in a paper. And he filled that out and he came and joined the podcast. We recorded it at my buddy, Victor Arzola's house, who was my guitarist at the time. So he already had his own home recording studio. And then my bass player, Kyle the Rabbit Burlington, did all he worked for LA Times, had just gotten fired because everything was going digital. He was a press photographer for them for years. So he brought his camera and did the video part, and voila, we were putting up 15-minute clips on YouTube, and we're the first official YouTube podcast in existence as far as I'm aware of. I've done all the research and I can't find another one that was doing this 10 years ago.
For podcasting, you were there were some guys maybe doing it a couple years before you. I've heard some guys at 2007, 2005, but nobody's really been doing video, not to go into too much for the listeners out there right now or the people watching, but things have jumped so much further over the last 10 years. It's much easier to get things rolling as opposed to when you guys had to work to produce something. I can't imagine how much time you put into it.
It was so hard. Look, I did a live stream from the grand opening event of Rampage Fitness Academy for Rampage's UFC gym in Mission Viejo. It's not there anymore, but my band played. I hosted the event. I helped. I made a commercial for him and his gym, and promoted the heck out of it. Tito Ortiz and some other UFC fighters were there. We interviewed them, but like setting up this. So this was 10 years ago. Setting up the live stream for that. There was only one service out there for that, and it was not easy to do from a parking lot. Like it was. It didn't work. It did not work well. And I learned my lesson about trying to live stream back then. But now here we are in the future, 10 years later, that I've been working for and hoping for all podcasters and all small media like myself.
So speaking of small media, you're trying to create a docu-series, or you're not trying, but you're actually creating a docu-series. So what's your relationship to hemp and cannabis?
Well, I'm pretty sure CBD is the only thing keeping me alive. Cannabis is the only thing that works on the arthritis and my neck pain, and the kinds of the migraines I get from that and my jaw arthritis are just insane. I'm obsessed with pill commercials and big pharma commercials.
Yeah.
And I saw one for migraines the other day, and just like we can get your 4 to 5 migraines a month down to maybe half of that, and I'm like, these lucky sons of bitches only have 4 to 5 migraines. I get that a week. Like, wow. That's a week. I'll have a migraine that lasts an entire week, like with everything I got. Because I also got pinched nerves in my neck and lower back. So 8 up here and 6 down here. So I'm losing feeling in my fingers and my toes, and sometimes all the way up to my hip. Depends on the kind of day I'm having, on what I can feel. Also losing feeling on the inside of my body. So I have about a 30-second warning to go to the bathroom. So I try not to leave the house too often anymore.
Wow.
So
you have a health. Basically, it comes down to your health is what really
it really does now. Now it does. Look, I got stoned my first time when I was 16, smoked hits from a bong, and my sister found me vegging out in front of the TV, not even knowing my name. Rediscovered it after I graduated when I was 18, and definitely fell in love with it. Look, I was molested when I was 13, and it was difficult going to bed without seeing this asshole's face every night and reliving that horror. Marijuana helped me get through that and helped me erase his face and calm down enough so I could go to bed on a regular basis throughout my 20s. Thank God for that. Same reason I became a blackout alcoholic at a certain point was, just to be able to go to bed, to get rid of, for my own mental health. not the greatest way to do things, but
you were self-medicating is what
self-medicating, because when you're a bartender in this country and you're only making $2.13 an hour in Utah, that's legal because they think you're making a great amount off of those 10% or less tips.
What years were you bartending through? What year were you bartending through?
97 till 4 years ago was my last restaurant gig.
What part of Utah were you in?
I started in Layton and then ended up in Ogden, because Ogden is kind of like the armpit of Utah. That's where the non-Mormons tend to go hang out a little more so they can party in peace.
So we got
although Utah's changed a lot since
I was going to say over the last probably 5 years there's been quite a change.
Yeah, see, because I moved back to California in 2000.
Okay.
Which is, now here's the fun irony part. So never got busted for weed in Utah. One seed, you could go to prison.
They're pretty tight.
They just legalized it now. So I never thought I'd be living in a world where marijuana was legal in Utah and Mitt Romney would be the voice of reason in the Republican Party. I'm fucking freaking out.
I know. Things have changed tremendously. That's for sure. Well, so you've had spent a lot of time in California. It sounds like, you're in Albuquerque now, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got time in Utah. So you've kind of seen an array, especially around the cannabis world, how things have. That's what I was about to say. Here's the irony part. So in 2001, I moved back to California in 2000. I graduated high school in California, ended up back in Utah for 7 years in my 20s, living with some cousins and just being a dumb 20-year-old. Mm-hmm.
So I get busted by a cop at the beach with one of my high school friends and some other people, and I take credit for all the pipes, all the weed and everything. So finally my first, and it's just a misdemeanor ticket.
Wow, you're a nice cousin.
Right. So so I'm back in California, finally busted, and it's just a misdemeanor ticket here, and I know it is. So I'm going to take that misdemeanor. And so I'm driving to court January 5th, 2001, not wearing my seatbelt and not in a hurry to get there. No other cars on the road, and some idiot pulls out in front of me and I T-bone him, and I break the windshield with my face, leading to a lot of these issues I currently have.
Mm-hmm.
So I bruised my tailbone, which has caused me traveling and sitting issues ever since then. Had a concussion for probably a good 7 months. Doctor put me on Prozac to help with my brain swelling at the time. That was the first time in my entire life that I realized Prozac makes me feel the exact same way marijuana does. So marijuana has been my ADD drug this entire time, and I didn't know it, which explains why every time I ever went into work and didn't take at least one hit for work, I had a horrible shift and was fucking up people's orders left and right, and felt bad for all of my customers. It was a horrible restaurant experience for them. So all of a sudden that made a whole lot of sense. And now that we're in the age of, education when it comes to cannabis, hemp, and especially CBD products, and we're learning more and more on a science basis, that all just makes more and more sense. But there's the irony of it. I'm going finally back in California where it's legal, get a misdemeanor ticket in an accident that causes all these issues now. And now look how legal it is in California. It's ridiculous. I'm in all of this over a misdemeanor.
Wow. Well, I have a misdemeanor from my past, so I feel you. It's amazing. Some of the stuff that's actually coming out where, they're abolish, like with Oregon right now, where they've legalized. I mean, this happened 2 days ago. It was February 1st. They decriminalized low amounts of all drugs, which is pretty crazy. And so the evolution of what's happening going from the pharmaceutical world to the illicit world is they're starting to kind of cross right now. And we're seeing that firsthand in all these different counties and states, right?
Right.
And so with your docu-series, share with me a couple of things that you're going to be, a couple of the topics that you're going to be working on, so that, I find it very interesting because there's so many different ways to look at this thing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
you've got a
right.
different perspective, right? And so it'd be interesting to hear your perspective on how you want to take this and how you see benefiting the cause or the efforts of legalization.
Well, and I'm trying to, with this docu-series, I'm trying to bring it, approach it from as many perspectives as possible, because, I was raised a right-wing Christian Mormon in Utah, and now I'm considered so far left, even though I'm not. I mean, wanting basic human decency for people is considered being just a far leftist these days. So it's like, and if you think being anti-fascist is such a bad thing, then go back and read a history book on why we fought World War II, for the love of God.
Yeah.
I don't get it. But anyway, I love getting into First Amendment and things like that too. Like I love all topics of politics, religion, music, entertainment. We are people, we're humans first, and we tend to forget that. The internet was supposed to bring us closer, but in so many ways it's pushed us farther apart, because now we just we've lost consequences. We may have freedom, but we've lost consequences in this world where we're not getting punched in the face anymore for saying something stupid immediately.
Yeah, I hear you. People,
Yeah.
It's tough for them to think. I was always told, because I talked a lot when I was young. I was told, you need to think before you talk, right? And I'm better at that than I used to be, for sure. But
exactly. So real quick. So so far I got like 6 episodes. It may end up 7 or 8 episodes. I don't know. But first episode is Marijuana Martyr. It's about my friend Stuart Mazzeo, who also had a misdemeanor in Arizona, refused to do time, refused to do community service or pay a fine, and decided to slit his wrists in open court. So that tells his story and the aftermath, and his family and what they're dealing with. I filmed that in 2013 as I was going to make a documentary about it for activist side of, why is it illegal and blah, 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 but never really had a clear vision of what to do with it. And here we are now, 2021, found all my old footage and was just like, well, the laws have changed around the country so much. I've grown as a producer, director, and an editor, and I have a clearer vision now. All of a sudden, it jumped from what I had to say from a single documentary into this has got to be multiple episodes, because now I have one on the history of hemp, following it from its origins in China and how it spread across the world from there. And that's just the industrial hemp, kind of how Columbus used it in the sails to discover America. And it was legal across the entire planet and wasn't really demonized or thought of as toxic or a bad thing until we in America made it illegal in the 1920s. And then the rest of the world was like, oh, well, if America thinks it's bad, maybe we should stop using it too. Thousands and thousands of years, it was okay. And then all of a sudden, America freaks out in the 1920s because Mexicans were smoking not hemp, but actual cannabis and getting high. And that freaked them out. And then they started blaming the Mexicans and the blacks for stealing white women and made reefer madness and all of that. So we also have another episode that I'm calling, reefer racism, where we go into the laws and how we should be expunging all these records of the black and brown people. I don't know how many times I've been busted by cops and told that I'm lucky I'm white, go home.
Really?
Yeah, and that they weren't going to process this, so that I knew they were telling me themselves that those cops were going to go home and smoke it, that they were okay with people smoking it, but it was their job to arrest black people for smoking it. So cover that, and how cops were started by the KKK and is basically a white supremacy organization and needs fixing. So we're going to delve into all of that. Another episode with the Weed of World, so we can look at the difference between laws in this country and around the rest of the world. I got a great interview coming up with a hemp grower in Ireland soon, and another podcaster like you in India. Going to be talking to people around the world, not just this country. Going to be talking to the Cannabis Coalition for Vets out of Texas that's trying to get it legalized nationwide, so that way vets can utilize it for their PTSD instead of all these pills they're taking that usually make things worse. So I'm going to be covering if there's a topic out there about cannabis, CBD, talking about the difference between CBD and THC, what makes it, this is going to be educational, informative, and entertaining. And there is no subject around the plant that I won't be getting into.
Well, that sounds exciting. I know a lot of these topics that you're talking about, I get questions once a week on something, especially with legalization, right? And so, you brought up Texas. That's another big one. Those guys have been fighting for PTSD approval down there for years now. I mean, I was working on some projects down there, so I hope that it seems like they're coming around for sure. We're also seeing transfers of a lot of people moving to Texas to take advantage of taxes, and so I think that will start helping change people's thoughts and visions as we grow forward. So I really looking forward to checking it out, because that should be awesome. Finding some of those guys that are deep in it right now is probably some of the most fun of it.
And I look forward to having you on it.
Absolutely. I'd love to be on it with you. Just we'll connect after this and figure out what works for us. But when people are looking for this, do you have a name for the show yet? Have you figured something out on that? Is it?
Yeah, I can't advertise it at all whatsoever. I've tried every platform and none of them will let me advertise it whatsoever.
I know, I feel your pain. I just try to advertise my show and I have a problem because of my link back to cannabis. So it makes it really challenging. I know exactly what you mean.
I'm literally trying to change every industry out there to make it marketable and acceptable. And that's one of the reasons I'm doing this. I mean, because like on my down the road show, YouTube, so youtube.com/DTR show, I was one of the first channels YouTube took from 15 minutes. They picked 100 channels as a test subject, and I was in that test subject to become a full hour. So if you remember back in the original YouTube days, I've been on every social media platform when they first started. It was only 15 minutes. You couldn't do 15 minutes in 1 second. I lost some footage that I can never get back because it was 1 second too long back in the day, and I didn't know what I was doing. So, but yeah, if you go there, subscribe. That's where you're going to find 10 years of fun Comic-Con nerdy stuff. And see where I relaunched the new Down the Road Show podcast and have realized I want to be more political and religious and talk more about life and be the activist I always have and use my platform correctly. And that was when I was just like, you know what? I got all these CBD reviews that I can't put advertising money on YouTube. Let's create the atmosphere I want to see with cannabis moving forward in all platforms in the industry. And let's talk about this in a real educational but entertainment way, because I have way too much to say. So this whole docu-series, because I couldn't get in with Netflix or Hulu. Hello, Netflix or Hulu. I'm waiting on your call, but I can't even get a pitch meeting because I'm still, even though I have great connections in, the network and Hollywood and different scenes and whatnot, I'm still a small fish in a very big pond. So, so I decided I'm just going to put it on my Down the Road Show YouTube channel. Though that's not going to allow me to make any money off of it, this isn't about me making money off of it. This is about it being seen. This is my swan song. This is my stamp on life. If this is the last thing I ever make and I die because of the side effects from one of my nerve damage pills and everybody gets to see this, I die happy.
Well, that's fantastic. And
it's called The Cost of Cannabis. So the cost of cannabis. Okay. Please, everybody Google the cost of cannabis, because the more that shows up in Google, the more they have no choice but to show my shit.
Exactly. And then also for the listeners out there and you guys viewing, you can also go to my blog page. It'll be, the links will be there, and you'll be able to find Casey there as well. So Casey, thank you so much for joining me.
Pleasure.
Can't wait to hear how the docu-series goes. So I'd love to have you back to talk that over in the future. And guys, thank you so much for listening to Plant Problems today. I hope we were able to give you some good insights on some future stuff coming up.
Launches on 4/20. I forgot to say that. The first episode launches on 4/20.
Oh, fantastic. So that's going to be here in a couple months. So you guys be ready for that 4/20 out there, and we will see you next time on Plant Problems.
See you down the road.
You've just listened to another insightful episode of Plant Problems. If you like what you heard so far, don't forget to tell your friends and colleagues. For additional resources or to leave a review, head over to plantproblem.com. Join us again next week on Plant Problems with Tony Frischknecht. We look forward to having conversations with you as we go along this journey.